The spaceship descended slowly through the thick layer of clouds, its sleek metallic surface shimmering faintly under the dim sunlight. Inside, Kyle and Lyra sat side by side, their large, almond-shaped eyes wide with anticipation. They were not alone. There were 6 other Zorathian students accompanying them on this journey to Earth. Each one carried a small bag filled with essentials, nutrient cubes, translation devices, and personal items that reminded them of home. For weeks they had prepared for this mission, studying human culture, history, and language. Now, as the planet loomed larger in the viewport, reality began to sink in. Earth looked strange from above. Unlike Zorathia's pristine blue skies and perfectly ordered cities, Earth was chaotic even from space. Swirls of green, brown, and white covered its surface, broken only by patches of gray where humans had built sprawling urban areas. The atmosphere seemed alive, constantly shifting and swirling like an unpredictable force. To Kale, it felt almost dangerous, though he couldn't quite explain why. Lyra, on the other hand, leaned closer to the window, her gaze fixed on the swirling oceans below. "It's so wild," she whispered, her voice soft but tinged with awe. Their instructor, Vela, floated nearby, her long silver hair flowing gently in the zero-gravity environment. She smiled at the 2 young aliens. "Remember, Earth is classified as a death world because of its harsh conditions and violent tendencies. But don't let that intimidate you. Humans are resilient, and there is much we can learn from them." Her words were meant to reassure them, but they only deepened Kale's unease. He glanced at Lyra, who nodded confidently. She always seemed braver than him when it came to new experiences. The landing process was smooth thanks to advanced navigation systems. As the ship touched down on a designated landing pad near a university campus in Colorado, Kale felt a mix of excitement and dread bubbling inside him. This would be their home for the next several months, a place far removed from the safety and predictability of Zorathia. When the hatch opened, cool air rushed into the cabin, carrying with it unfamiliar scents. There was something earthy about it, mixed with traces of metal and vegetation. It wasn't unpleasant, just different. Outside, a group of humans waited to greet them. Most wore casual clothing, jeans, t-shirts, and jackets, and some held signs written in both English and Zorathian script. One man stepped forward, his face breaking into a warm smile. "Welcome to Earth," he said, his voice booming cheerfully. His name was Daniel, and he introduced himself as Kale's host father. Beside him stood Laura, his wife, holding a tray of snacks. They waved enthusiastically, clearly eager to make their alien guests feel welcome. Lyra, meanwhile, was greeted by Emily and her younger brother, Alex. Emily was tall and slender, with curly red hair and freckles scattered across her cheeks. Alex, barely 10 years old, stared up at the aliens with undisguised curiosity. "Are you really from another planet?" he blurted out before Emily could scold him for being rude. Lyra chuckled softly, her laughter sounding like a series of melodic notes. "Yes, we are," she replied through her translator device. "And now we're here to learn about yours." As they loaded their belongings into waiting vehicles, Kale couldn't help but notice how casually the humans interacted with each other. They hugged, shook hands, and patted shoulders without hesitation. Physical contact was rare among Zorathians, reserved only for formal ceremonies or medical procedures. Here, it seemed almost instinctive. Laura noticed Kale's discomfort when Daniel offered him a handshake. "Don't worry," she said kindly. "You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with." Kyle appreciated her understanding, though he eventually extended his hand tentatively, mimicking what he'd seen others do. The ride to their temporary homes was equally eye-opening. Kyle sat in the back seat of Daniel and Laura's car, marveling at the speed and efficiency of human transportation. Back on Zorathia, travel was done primarily via teleportation pods, which eliminated the need for roads or vehicles. Here, cars roared along highways surrounded by towering trees and endless fields. Occasionally, they passed animals grazing peacefully, or birds soaring high in the sky. Everything seemed so alive. When they arrived at Daniel and Laura's house, Kyle was struck by its simplicity. The structure was made of wood and brick, with windows that overlooked a small garden bursting with colorful flowers. Inside, the furniture was functional, yet cozy, adorned with photographs of smiling faces and handmade decorations. It was nothing like the sterile, minimalist dwellings of Zorathia, where every object served a specific purpose. Here things appeared to exist simply for the joy they brought. Laura gave Kale a brief tour of the house, pointing out important features like the kitchen, bathroom, and his bedroom. "Make yourself at home," she said warmly. "If you need anything, just ask." Kale nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure how to respond. Asking for help wasn't common practice among Zorathians. Independence was highly valued. Still, he appreciated her kindness and resolved to adapt as best he could. That evening, the entire group gathered at the university for orientation. A professor named Dr. Bennett welcomed them, explaining the goals of the exchange program. "Our aim is to foster mutual understanding between our species," he explained. "You'll attend classes, participate in activities, and immerse yourselves in human culture. We hope you'll leave with a deeper appreciation for our way of life and perhaps teach us a thing or two about yours." Kale listened intently, though his attention wavered during the segment on emergency preparedness. Dr. Bennett demonstrated basic first aid techniques, showing how to bandage wounds, apply pressure to stop bleeding, and perform CPR. Kale found it all rather primitive compared to Zorathian methods, which relied on instantaneous healing technologies. Why bother learning such rudimentary skills when machines could handle everything? He exchanged a skeptical glance with Lyra, who seemed equally unimpressed. Despite his doubts, Kyle couldn't deny the enthusiasm of the human instructors. They spoke passionately about the importance of being prepared for emergencies, emphasizing that disasters could strike anywhere, anytime. "Here on Earth," Dr. Bennett said gravely, "we don't have the luxury of assuming everything will go smoothly. We have to plan for the worst-case scenario." Kale frowned, puzzled by this mindset. On Zorathia, planning for failure was considered defeatist. Success was achieved through careful calculation and technological precision. After the session ended, Kale approached Lyra, who was chatting animatedly with Emily. "What do you think of all this?" he asked quietly. Lyra shrugged. "It's different, I'll admit, but maybe there's something to it. Humans seem to value resourcefulness over reliance on technology. That's kind of admirable." Kyle wasn't convinced. Still, he decided to keep an open mind. After all, they were here to learn, not judge. Little did he know that these lessons in emergency aid would soon prove more valuable than he ever imagined. The weekend camping trip was supposed to be an exciting adventure, an opportunity for the Zorathian exchange students to experience Earth's natural beauty firsthand. Kyle and Lyra had heard about the Rocky Mountains during their orientation sessions, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer scale of the towering peaks or the crispness of the mountain air. As they boarded the bus early Saturday morning, they felt a mix of anticipation and unease. The wilderness was beautiful, yes, but it also seemed unpredictable in a way that made Kale uneasy. The journey to the campsite took several hours, winding through narrow roads flanked by dense forests. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Kyle pressed his face against the window, watching as deer darted across open fields and birds soared overhead. Back on Zorathia, nature existed only in carefully controlled environments, biodomes designed to mimic ecosystems without any real danger. Here, everything felt raw and untamed. It was exhilarating but also slightly terrifying. When they finally arrived at the campsite, the group gathered around Dr. Bennett, who began explaining the day's activities. "We'll hike up to a scenic overlook this morning," he said, pointing to a trail marked with wooden signs. "Then we'll set up camp near the lake for lunch. Remember to stay together and keep an eye out for wildlife." Wildlife. The word sent a shiver down Kale's spine. On Zorathia, animals were either extinct or kept in secure habitats where they posed no threat. Here, creatures roamed freely, and some of them, like bears and mountain lions, were known to attack humans. Lyra, however, seemed unfazed. She adjusted the straps of her backpack and grinned at Alex, who was bouncing excitedly beside her. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded eagerly, already racing ahead to join Emily and Ryan, another student from the university. Kyle hesitated for a moment before following, keeping close to Daniel and Laura. He trusted them to guide him safely through this unfamiliar terrain. The hike started off smoothly enough. The trail was well marked, and the scenery was breathtaking. Streams trickled alongside the path, their clear waters reflecting the bright blue sky above. Wildflowers bloomed in vibrant clusters, painting the landscape with bursts of color. Kyle found himself relaxing slightly, even managing to enjoy the fresh air and the sound of rustling leaves. For a while, he forgot his earlier apprehension. But then things took a turn. About halfway up the trail, the group reached a steep rocky slope. Some of the humans scrambled up easily, using their hands to steady themselves as they climbed. Kyle watched nervously, unsure if he should attempt it. His body wasn't built for such physical exertion. Zorathians relied on anti-gravity platforms for movement rather than muscle strength. Just as he considered asking Daniel for advice, Ryan called out, "Come on, Kale, you can do it." Encouraged by the friendly tone, Kale took a deep breath and began ascending cautiously. Each step required careful thought, his long fingers gripping jagged rocks for support. He was halfway up when disaster struck. A loose stone shifted beneath Ryan's foot, sending him sliding backward with a startled cry. Before anyone could react, he tumbled down the slope, landing hard on the ground below. For a moment, silence fell over the group. Then chaos erupted. Ryan groaned in pain, clutching his leg, which was bent at an unnatural angle. Blood seeped through the fabric of his jeans, staining the dirt around him. Panic spread among the students, their voices rising in alarm. Kyle froze, unsure what to do. This kind of accident would never happen on Zorathia, not with advanced safety measures in place everywhere. He glanced at Lyra, who looked equally shocked but quickly composed herself. Daniel sprang into action. "Everyone, stay calm," he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. He knelt beside Ryan, examining the injury carefully. "Laura, grab the first aid kit from my pack. Alex, go find Dr. Bennett and tell him we need help getting Ryan back to the bus." His instructions were clear and concise, leaving no room for confusion. Kale watched in amazement as the humans worked together seamlessly, each person knowing exactly what to do. Laura returned with the first aid kit, handing it to Daniel. He opened it swiftly, pulling out bandages and antiseptic wipes. "We need to stop the bleeding first," he explained, pressing a clean cloth firmly against Ryan's wound. Ryan winced but didn't protest, gritting his teeth as tears welled up in his eyes. Nearby, Emily crouched down, speaking softly to reassure him. "You're going to be okay," she murmured. "Just hang in there." Kale couldn't tear his gaze away from the scene unfolding before him. Every move Daniel made was deliberate, every decision calculated to stabilize Ryan until professional medical help arrived. When the makeshift splint was applied to immobilize Ryan's leg, Kale leaned over to Lyra and whispered, "How does he know what to do? We don't have anything like this on Zorathia." Lyra tilted her head thoughtfully. I think it's because they've practiced. They prepare for situations like this because they can't rely on machines to fix everything." Her words stayed with Kale as they waited for Dr. Bennett and the rest of the group to arrive. By the time reinforcements showed up, Ryan's condition had stabilized enough for him to be carried back down the trail. The mood remained somber, but there was also a sense of relief. No one had panicked permanently, and thanks to Daniel's quick thinking, Ryan's injury hadn't worsened. That night, after returning to the university campus, Kale lay awake in his bed, replaying the events of the day in his mind. He thought about how efficiently the humans had responded to the emergency, working as a team despite the initial shock. On Zorathia, accidents were rare, and when they did occur, nanobots and automated systems handled everything. Humans, on the other hand, relied on their own skills and resourcefulness. It was inefficient compared to Zorathian methods, but undeniably effective. The next morning during breakfast, Kale brought up the topic with Daniel. "Why do humans learn these techniques?" he asked curiously. "Wouldn't it be easier to let machines handle emergencies?" Daniel paused, considering the question. "Maybe it would be easier," he admitted, "but machines aren't always available, and sometimes the simplest solutions are the most reliable. Knowing how to help someone with your own two hands, it gives you a sense of control, even in the worst situations." Kale mulled over Daniel's response, realizing there was wisdom in his words. Later that day, he and Lyra decided to enroll in a first aid workshop offered by the university. If humans could adapt to their unpredictable environment, perhaps the Zorathians could too. After all, learning new skills was part of why they had come to Earth in the first place. As they signed up for the class, Kale felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. Maybe Earth wasn't just a chaotic death world. It was also a place full of lessons waiting to be learned. The first aid workshop was held in a small classroom on the university campus. Kale and Lyra arrived early, their curiosity outweighing any lingering doubts they had about the practicality of human emergency techniques. The room was set up with rows of tables, each stocked with supplies like bandages, splints, and antiseptic wipes. At the front stood Sarah, the instructor, a woman in her mid-30s with short brown hair and a confident demeanor. She introduced herself as a local paramedic who specialized in outdoor rescues, then wasted no time diving into the lesson. "Today, we're going to focus on skills you can use anywhere," Sarah began, her voice calm but firm. "No fancy equipment, just what you have around you." She demonstrated how to tie a tourniquet using a strip of cloth and a stick, explaining that stopping blood flow could mean the difference between life and death. Kyle watched intently, his long fingers twitching as if itching to try it himself. Lyra leaned forward, her wide eyes fixed on Sarah's hands as she worked. When it was their turn to practice, Kale hesitated. Back on Zorathia, medical procedures were performed by machines so precise that human error was impossible. Here, everything relied on manual skill and judgment calls. He glanced at Lyra, who had already grabbed a piece of fabric and was attempting to replicate Sarah's technique. Her movements weren't perfect, but she seemed determined to get it right. "You'll get the hang of it," Laura encouraged him gently, noticing his hesitation. She handed him a clean cloth and a wooden dowel. "Start simple. Focus on the basics." Kale nodded and began tying the makeshift tourniquet around his own arm, mimicking Sarah's instructions. It felt strange, not because it was difficult, but because it required so much reliance on intuition and improvisation. When he finally tightened the knot, he looked up to see Daniel giving him an approving smile. "Good job," Daniel said. "It's not perfect, but it's functional. That's all that matters in an emergency." As the workshop progressed, Kale grew more comfortable. They practiced applying pressure to simulated wounds, creating splints from sticks and duct tape, and even performing CPR on mannequins. Each exercise reinforced the idea that simplicity didn't mean ineffectiveness. In fact, the more Kale thought about it, the more he realized how adaptable humans were. Without access to advanced technology, they had developed methods that worked under almost any circumstance. Lyra, meanwhile, embraced the challenge wholeheartedly. By the end of the session, she had mastered several techniques, including wrapping, bandages tightly enough to immobilize a sprained ankle. "I never thought I'd enjoy something so basic," she admitted to Emily during a break. "But there's something satisfying about knowing you can help someone without needing a machine." Emily grinned. "That's the beauty of it. You don't need anything special to make a difference. Just your hands and a bit of creativity." By the third day of the workshop, Kale's confidence had grown significantly. He no longer second-guessed every move. Instead, he focused on learning as much as possible. One afternoon, while practicing how to stabilize a broken bone, he accidentally knocked over a tray of supplies. Bandages and antiseptic wipes scattered across the floor, drawing awkward glances from the other students. For a moment, Kyle felt embarrassed, his cheeks flushing a pale shade of blue, a sign of discomfort among Zorathians. Sarah noticed and knelt beside him. "Don't worry about it," she said with a reassuring smile. Mistakes happen. What matters is how you recover from them. She helped him gather the items, then added, "Primitive doesn't mean ineffective. Sometimes the simplest tools save more lives than complex ones ever could." Her words resonated deeply with Kyle. He realized that humanity's strength lay not in their technology but in their ability to adapt and persevere. On Zorathea, efficiency was prized above all else, but here, resilience was equally important. Perhaps, he thought, the two approaches could complement each other. Later that evening, Kale and Lyra discussed what they had learned over dinner at Daniel and Laura's house. "Do you think we'll ever use these skills?" Kale asked, poking at the vegetable stew Laura had prepared. It tasted surprisingly good, though its texture was still foreign to him. "I hope not," Lyra replied with a laugh. "But if we do, at least we'll know what to do." Imagine being able to help someone back home, without relying on nanobots or healing pods. Kale nodded slowly. The idea intrigued him. While Zorathian society valued technological advancement, there was something appealing about the simplicity of human methods. If nothing else, the knowledge gave him a sense of empowerment he hadn't felt before. Their newfound skills would soon be put to the test. A few days later, the university town was hit by a sudden and severe storm. Dark clouds rolled in quickly, bringing torrential rain and fierce winds that knocked out power across the area. Trees swayed violently, their branches snapping under the strain. Within hours, streets flooded, cutting off access to many neighborhoods. Emergency services struggled to keep up with the influx of calls, leaving residents to fend for themselves. When news of the crisis reached the campus, volunteers sprang into action. Kyle and Lyra joined the effort without hesitation, eager to put their training to use. Armed with flashlights, raincoats, and backpacks filled with supplies, they waded through knee-deep water to deliver food and medicine to stranded families. The scene was chaotic. People shouted for help, children cried, and debris floated past like driftwood. But Kale remained focused, remembering Sarah's advice: stay calm and adapt. At one point, they encountered a man trapped inside his flooded basement. His leg was bleeding heavily after he cut himself on broken glass while trying to escape. Without thinking, Lultry with basic English continued. Lyra sprang into action. She pulled a scarf from her bag and fashioned it into a tourniquet, tightening it just above the wound to slow the bleeding. The man groaned in pain but managed to thank her through gritted teeth. Kale stayed close, holding the flashlight steady so Lyra could work. Once the tourniquet was secure, they helped the man climb to safety, guiding him to higher ground where rescue teams were setting up a temporary shelter. Word spread quickly about the aliens' bravery and competence. Neighbors who had initially been wary of the Zorathians now approached them with gratitude. "Never thought I'd see extraterrestrials saving lives," joked Alex, earning laughter from the exhausted group. Kyle smiled despite the fatigue weighing him down. For the first time since arriving on Earth, he felt truly useful. As the night wore on, the storm showed no signs of letting up, but neither did the volunteers. They worked tirelessly, checking on families, distributing supplies, and offering comfort wherever it was needed. Kale marveled at how everyone came together, putting aside differences to help one another. Even in the face of disaster, humans found ways to connect and support each other. It was a lesson he knew he would carry with him long after leaving Earth. By morning, the worst of the storm had passed, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Cleanup efforts began immediately, with volunteers clearing debris and repairing damaged homes. Exhausted but proud, Kale and Lyra returned to Daniel and Laura's house, collapsing onto the couch. Their clothes were soaked, their bodies ached, and their hands were raw from hours of manual labor, but they felt accomplished. Laura brought them hot tea, her expression soft with admiration. "You two were amazing last night," she said. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Kale exchanged a glance with Lyra, both of them too tired to respond. But deep down, they understood the significance of what they had done. Not only had they helped save lives, but they had also proven to themselves and to others that adaptation wasn't just a human trait. It was universal. In the weeks that followed, Kale and Lyra continued to reflect on their experiences. They shared stories with their fellow Zorathians, describing the storm and the lessons they had learned. At first, their peers were skeptical, dismissing human methods as primitive. But as Kale and Lyra demonstrated the effectiveness of their newfound skills, attitudes began to shift. Slowly but surely, elements of human emergency techniques made their way into Zorathian training programs. Though their time on Earth was coming to an end, Kale and Lyra knew the impact would last far beyond their departure. They had come to study human behavior, but they left with something far greater, a deeper understanding of resilience, compassion, and the power of simplicity. And somewhere amidst the stars, they carried those lessons with them, ready to share them with their own world. The day finally came for Kale and Lyra to return to Zorathia. The weeks they had spent on Earth seemed to blur together now, filled with moments of wonder, challenge, and growth. As they packed their belongings into small metallic cases designed for interstellar travel, they couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Excitement bubbled inside them at the thought of reuniting with family and friends back home. But there was also a pang of sadness. Earth had changed them in ways they hadn't anticipated. Daniel and Laura arrived early to see Kale off, bringing along a small gift, a framed photograph of the two of them hiking during one of the group outings. "Something to remember us by," Laura said with a warm smile. Kyle accepted it gratefully, his fingers brushing against the smooth glass. He didn't fully understand why humans placed so much value on objects like this, but he appreciated the sentiment behind it. It wasn't just a picture. It was a memory, a connection to the people who had welcomed him into their lives. Lyra, too, received a farewell present from Emily and Alex, a handmade bracelet woven from colorful threads. "It's supposed to bring good luck," Alex explained, proudly as if revealing a great secret. Lyra slipped it onto her wrist, marveling at how something so simple could carry such meaning. She hugged them both tightly, her voice soft but sincere. "Thank you for everything. I'll never forget what you've taught me." As they boarded the spaceship, Kale and Lyra took one last look at the university campus, now bathed in the golden light of sunrise. The buildings, the trees, even the distant mountains, all of it felt familiar now, almost like a second home. They waved to the gathered crowd of humans who had come to bid them farewell, their hearts swelling with gratitude. For all its chaos and unpredictability, Earth had been kind to them. The journey back to Zorathia was quiet compared to the bustling activity of Earth. The spaceship hummed softly as it glided through the vast expanse of space, carrying its passengers closer to the sleek silver cities they called home. Kale sat in silence, staring out the viewport at the endless sea of stars. His mind kept drifting back to the stormy night in Colorado, to the families they had helped and the lives they had touched. He wondered if anyone else on Zorathia would truly understand what they had experienced or if they would dismiss it as irrelevant. When they landed, however, they were greeted not with skepticism but with curiosity. News of their adventures on Earth had spread quickly, thanks to reports sent ahead by Vela, their instructor. A delegation of Zorathian officials awaited them at the docking bay, eager to hear about their findings. Among them was Kale's father, Oren, whose stern expression softened slightly when he saw his son step off the ship. "Welcome home," Oren said, pulling Kale into a brief embrace. "We've heard remarkable things about your time on Earth." Over the next few days, Kale and Lyra shared their stories with audiences ranging from government officials to ordinary citizens. They spoke about the beauty of Earth's untamed wilderness, the warmth of human hospitality, and the ingenuity of their emergency techniques. At first, many Zorathians struggled to grasp the concept of relying on manual skills rather than advanced technology. "Why bother learning such primitive methods?" one official asked during a public forum. "Our machines can handle any situation far more efficiently." Kale exchanged a knowing glance with Lyra before responding. "Efficiency isn't always the most important thing," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the room's attention. "Sometimes simplicity is more reliable. On Earth, we saw how people adapted to crises using nothing but their hands and whatever materials were available. It made me realize that resilience isn't about having perfect tools, It's about being prepared to face challenges no matter what. To illustrate his point, Cale demonstrated some of the techniques he had learned, tying a tourniquet around his arm and explaining its purpose. The audience watched in silence, their expressions shifting from doubt to fascination. When he finished, applause erupted throughout the chamber, echoing off the polished walls. Even Oren looked impressed, nodding slowly as if seeing his son in a new light. Inspired by Cale and Lyra's experiences, Zorathian leaders began incorporating elements of human emergency practices into their own training programs. Medical teams started practicing basic first aid techniques alongside their use of nanobots and healing pods. Schools introduced courses on resourcefulness and adaptability, emphasizing the importance of preparation in unpredictable situations. Slowly but surely, Earth's influence began to take root in Zorathian society. Years passed, and the lessons learned from Earth continued to shape Zorathia. One day, news arrived of a crisis on another Deathworld, a planet plagued by frequent earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Its inhabitants, though intelligent, lacked the resources to deal with the constant disasters. When Zorathian diplomats arrived to offer aid, they brought not only advanced technology but also simple yet effective tools inspired by Earth's ingenuity. Tents made from durable fabric, water purification tablets, and portable medical kits became staples of their relief efforts. Cale and Lyra watched these developments from afar, proud of the role they had played in bridging the gap between worlds. Though they had returned to their comfortable lives on Zorathia, memories of Earth lingered in their minds. Late at night, when the city lights dimmed and the hum of daily life faded, Kyle would pull out the photograph Daniel and Laura had given him. He would trace the outlines of the mountains in the background, remembering the crisp air and the sound of laughter echoing through the forest. Lyra, meanwhile, still wore the bracelet Alex had made for her. Its colors had faded slightly over time, but she refused to remove it, saying it reminded her of the bond she had formed with her human friends. "They taught us how to be strong," she often said to Cale during quiet moments. "Not because they're better than us, but because they know how to work together, even when things seem impossible." One evening, as they strolled through a park near their homes, Cale turned to Lyra with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what Earth is like now?" he asked. "If Ryan recovered from his injury, or if Daniel and Laura are still teaching others about resilience?" Lyra smiled softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I'm sure they're doing fine," she replied. "Humans have a way of bouncing back no matter what happens. That's what makes them so special." Cale nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. Though they were light years apart, Earth and Zorathia were connected by shared experiences and mutual understanding. And somewhere amidst the stars, the legacy of those exchange students lived on, a testament to the power of learning, adapting, and growing together. As they walked side by side under the glow of Zorathia's twin moons, Cale and Lyra knew they had brought back more than just knowledge from Earth. They had brought back hope, an unwavering belief that even in the face of adversity, compassion and ingenuity could bridge the widest gaps and unite the most unlikely allies. Years had passed since Cale and Lyra returned to Zorathia, but their journey to Earth remained a vivid memory. The changes they inspired continued to ripple through Zorathian society, shaping how people thought about resilience and adaptability. What started as a small exchange program had grown into something much larger, a cultural shift that redefined what it meant to be prepared for life's challenges. Cale found himself working closely with the Zorathian Emergency Response Division, a branch of the government dedicated to handling crises both on their planet and beyond. It was a role he hadn't imagined for himself when he first arrived on Earth, but one that felt natural now. He spent his days training others in the techniques he'd learned, how to stabilize injuries without advanced tools, how to improvise, shelter during disasters, and how to work together under pressure. At first, some of his colleagues resisted these methods. "Why should we waste time learning outdated skills?" one of them asked during a training session. "Our technology can handle anything." Cale didn't argue. Instead, he invited the skeptical colleague to join him for a live demonstration. Together, they simulated a scenario where all power sources were cut off, leaving no access to machines or automated systems. Using only basic supplies like cloth, rope, and splints, Kyle showed how effective human-inspired techniques could be. By the end of the exercise, even the most stubborn skeptics admitted there was value in preparation beyond reliance on technology. Lyra, meanwhile, took a different path. She became an advocate for cross-cultural understanding, traveling to other planets to share stories of her time on Earth. Her presentations weren't just about first aid or emergency preparedness, they were about connection. She spoke passionately about the kindness of humans, their ability to come together in times of need, and their creativity in solving problems. "It's not about replacing our way of doing things," she would say. "It's about adding new tools to our toolbox. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the strongest." Her message resonated deeply with audiences across the galaxy. On one visit to a distant moon called Nisara, she met a group of settlers struggling to survive in harsh conditions. Their crops were failing, and their water supply was dwindling. When Lyra suggested they try using Earth-style purification tablets made from local materials, they were hesitant at first. But after seeing her demonstrate the process, they agreed to give it a try. Within weeks, the settlers reported improved health and renewed hope for their community. Word spread quickly, and soon other settlements began adopting similar methods. Back on Zorathia, Kale and Lyra reunited occasionally to reflect on their progress. They often walked along the edge of a shimmering lake near their homes, its surface reflecting the pale light of the twin moons. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking the water, Kale turned to Lyra with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we've done enough?" he asked. "Or is there still more we can do?" Lyra tilted her head, considering the question. "I don't think we'll ever truly be done," she replied. "There's always room to grow, to learn, to adapt. That's what Earth taught us, isn't it? Life doesn't stay the same, it evolves, and so should we." Her words stayed with Kale long after their conversation ended. He realized she was right. The lessons they had brought back from Earth weren't static achievements. They were living ideas meant to inspire continuous growth. With this in mind, Kyle decided to expand his efforts beyond Zorathia. He proposed creating an interstellar exchange program modeled after the one that had sent him and Lyra to Earth. The initiative would allow students from various planets to spend time on worlds vastly different from their own, fostering mutual understanding and collaboration. The proposal was met with enthusiasm, though not without challenges. Some argued that exposing young individuals to unfamiliar environments might be too risky. Others worried about potential cultural clashes or misunderstandings. But Kale persisted, drawing on his own experiences to address their concerns. "Yes, it will be challenging," he acknowledged during a meeting with Zorathian leaders. "But isn't that the point? Growth rarely comes from staying comfortable. If we want to build stronger connections between species, we have to take risks, to step outside our comfort zones and embrace the unknown." His determination paid off. Within months, the first wave of participants was selected for the program. Among them were 2 Zorathian students eager to follow in Kale and Lyra's footsteps. As they prepared for departure, Kale couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Watching these young aliens board the ship reminded him of his own journey years ago, the mix of excitement and uncertainty, the promise of discovery. While Kyle focused on expanding the exchange program, Lyra continued her travels, sharing Earth's lessons far and wide. One day she received an invitation to speak at a conference on a planet called Velos, known for its strict adherence to tradition. The Valens were initially wary of her ideas, dismissing them as impractical, but Lyra remained patient, knowing that change took time. During her presentation, she shared anecdotes from her time on Earth, how humans used teamwork and resourcefulness to overcome obstacles, how they valued compassion over perfection. By the end of her talk, the audience erupted into applause, their skepticism replaced by curiosity. A young Velan scientist approached her afterward, asking if she could teach them how to create makeshift shelters using local materials. Lyra smiled warmly, nodding. Of course, she said. Let's start with what you already know, and then see how far we can go. As the years went on, Kale and Lyra's influence reached farther than either of them could have imagined. Planets once isolated by differences in technology and culture began collaborating on projects aimed at improving quality of life for all. Emergency response teams adopted hybrid methods, combining advanced machinery with simple, yet effective, techniques. Even diplomatic relations improved as leaders recognized the importance of understanding perspectives beyond their own. One day, while reviewing reports from the latest exchange program participants, Kale came across a story that made him smile. A group of alien students stranded on a remote outpost had successfully repaired a damaged communication device, using nothing but scraps from their surroundings. Their ingenuity saved lives, allowing rescuers to locate them before supplies ran out. In the report, one student wrote, "We owe our survival to the lessons we learned from Earth. Simplicity can save lives." Kale shared the story with Lyra later that evening. They sat together on the same bench overlooking the lake, watching the moons rise higher in the sky. "Do you think they'll ever forget about us?" Lyra asked softly. "About what we did?" Kale shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "Not as long as they keep passing down the lessons we brought back. Those stories belong to everyone now, not just us." In that moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of their home planet, Kyle and Lyra felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had set out to learn about humanity, but in doing so they had discovered something equally profound: the universal power of resilience, compassion, and adaptation. Though separated by countless light years, Earth and Zorathia remained forever connected, not by geography, but by shared values and mutual respect. And somewhere amidst the stars, those lessons continued to shine brightly, guiding countless beings toward a brighter future.